In the early 1990s, this team of Navy SEALs was called the Western North Carolina. Their mission was to neutralize a creature that was behind a family gone missing in the Appalachian Mountains. The following is a first-hand account of one of the team members. After being sanctioned by an alphabet government agency, they were to fly out the next morning. When they were first briefed on the target, they would literally laugh out loud. They all thought this has got to be a joke, but they would soon find out it was the furthest thing from it. After being shown multiple pictures of victims who were attacked, this SEAL team member would look over at his closest friend and fellow teammate. He was of Native American descent and he looked pale white. He sent chills down his spine as he mumbled, "This isn't good at all." They would arrive the next day via chopper. As they landed, they seen the local sheriff waiting to welcome them. "I haven't been this happy to see the cavalry since Korea," he would say. He would take them through town showing the damage done by what he called the hairy demons. From trash buildings to disappearing families. After getting as much intel as they could from the sheriff, he would show them an old deer path. "Follow this, you'll find them," he explained, and they set out on their mission. As they were making their way up the side of the Appalachian Mountains, their Native American team member would tell them a story. "When I was young, my grandfather used to tell me all about them. How as a young man, he and his brothers would go on hunts. He would call the beasts wild men. They would harass our villages and take our children. Now I understand why he would never let me out at night," he explained. It was around 1400 hours when they would find their first track. Then they began seeing sign everywhere. They soon figured out that there were 7 of them total, and they began tracking them diligently. It was about 1930 hours and dark had just began to fall. That's when the point man would stop dead in his tracks and speak into his headset. You could hear the adrenaline in his voice. "Sir, I see one, and it's huge." "If you have the shot, take it," said the lieutenant. As he squeezed the trigger, the shot pierced the night silence. The 7.62 millimeter round hit the beast square in the chest. It let out a fierce roar and acted as if it was nothing but a mosquito. Suddenly, all 7 of them began attacking at once. The beast moved throughout the forest with amazing agility. They were so quick you could barely see them, making them extremely hard to hit. Then out of nowhere, one of their teammates lets out a deathly scream. They look back as he's being pulled up into a tree. As they were fighting, one of the lieutenant's superiors would radio in, asking him to catch one alive. "Not a fucking chance," the lieutenant would reply. They would battle the beast for a couple days, killing the last one on the 3rd night. Soon after, they would find the bodies of the missing family and their teammate, or what was left of them, as the beast had been eating them. Next day, they were told to stay quiet. They'd say their teammate died during training. Over 20 have died from training in the area since. U.S. soldiers encountered Bigfoot during the Vietnam War. It's over a year into the conflict when a squad of 12 men were making their way back to camp after a long day of fighting. But as they were making their way through the dense jungle, the North Vietnamese attacked. The squad would hit the deck, and after a roll call, they knew everybody was okay. Dusk was just beginning to fall over the jungle, so they couldn't see anybody, but they could see the flash from their muzzle. So they would occasionally pop up and return fire in their direction. When suddenly, what the soldier thought was a bush next to him stood up. The beast stood 7 feet tall and had a body that was pure muscle. It was covered in hair and moved through the jungle with impressive agility. No sooner they hear the North Vietnamese cry out to each other, "Putposes!" And that's when the gunfire stops. Then you hear a beast from their side let out a fierce roar, and seemingly out of nowhere, a dozen of them stand up around them. The Vietnamese began opening fire. One of the beasts was taking fire and running through the bullets, but they quickly dispersed. The U.S. soldiers would retreat and return to base, coming back the next morning to find North soldiers dead. What is up, my people? I hope you guys have been enjoying these 3-minute TikTok video compilations. Got a lot of great content there. So keep watching. Stay tuned. Thank you guys for all the support. I hope you enjoyed the dragon videos. If you haven't watched them yet, go check them out. I'm going to put them on the end screen to this video. So thank you guys again. Love y'all. Stay in the light and keep on rocking. We got a lot more content coming your way. Peace. And one more quick favor, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I post. Night God, out. U.S. Marines' terrifying encounter during the Vietnam War. The battle took place on Hill 868 of the Quang Nam province. It started when a platoon of about 25 men radioed back to headquarters that they spotted movement in the jungle. The Marines would be told to hold their position and not give themselves away. Just observe the enemy movements and then radio back. They would lay there for 15 minutes, hearing the enemy crash through the jungle all around them. The captain then radioed headquarters.
HQ, this is Alpha. Yeah, soldier? The enemy seems to be slowly surrounding us. And sir, you're not gonna believe this. It looks like Bigfoot.
Repeat that, soldier.
You heard me.
That's when suddenly over the radio, you could hear a fierce roar. A couple dozen would stand up and a battle ensued. The radio cuts off. The next day they would send more soldiers to the last known location of the Marines, finding dead soldiers and dead rock apes. But they would leave the dead bodies, based on witness accounts. The picture behind me was only recently released to the public by the Russian government. It's said to be the last picture taken by one of the hikers who died in the Dyatlov Pass incident. It was January 27th, 1959, when 10 hikers, 8 men and 2 women, set on a voyage through the Ural Mountains. The first few days went as planned, except for one hiker, Yuri Yudin. Just a few days in the hike, he had to turn back because of an ailing knee injury. He was disappointed, but at the time he did not realize it would actually save his life. But just before he turns back, Igor Dyatlov, the group leader, would tell him to watch for them. They were supposed to return around February 12th. The 12th would come and they still hadn't returned, but nobody raised a concern until later. Due to the difficulty of the hike, Yuri didn't think much of it. He gave it another week. But more than a week later, they still hadn't showed. So on February 20th, 1959, Yuri would call his friends in missing. Government officials would be shocked at what they'd find. It's February 1st, and the remaining 9 hikers run into a blizzard. As a result, they would end up stopping at a camp base near a mountain. Here, they would drop off the excess gear they gained from Yuri's departure. After this, despite local Mansi tribes warning them not to go through, they would continue up the slope of Dead Man's Mountain. According to the last journal entry, this is where they would set up camp, just a few hundred yards up the mountain. Just a couple hours after nightfall, they would start hearing a whistling sound. And not just any whistle. It would resemble a deep, train-like whistle. It would continue to get closer and closer until whatever it was just outside of their tent. At this time, they began cutting holes at the top with their knives to peek through, before eventually cutting a massive hole and escaping from the inside of the tent. These educated and experienced hikers would leave their tent with no gear and would begin walking single file in 2 to 3 feet of snow. So on February 20th, 1959, the first thing the investigators would find is their tent ravaged. They would continue to follow their footprints until they found the bodies. But the way they looked and their injuries weren't consistent with freezing to death. A couple of men had sustained injuries similar to that of a car crash, broken ribs, and a crushed skull. They'd find multiple bodies mutilated, tongues torn out. Along with a few cameras, almost every hiker had a camera. Multiple pictures were taken, and one of the last ones they just recently released to the public. This would be the last picture they took before they lost their lives. The local Mansi natives would refer to them as Mank, forest people, what the Russians call the Yeti. 2 of the officials from the search party in their later years would admit that they had pictures of footprints. They would also find pictures of what seemed to be bright flashing lights. And just a day after their presumed death on February 2nd, the Russian government would discontinue a mission to catch one. What a coincidence. Maybe those were the flashing lights? Like and follow for more. The picture behind me was only recent. Alright fam, you're gonna want to hear this one. A couple days ago, a soldier with the highest security clearance sent me a message on my TikTok. In his message, he would state that he might know why Biden left Afghanistan the way he did. Intrigued, I said, please explain. He disclosed that he had top secret security clearance, and that it was his second tour in Afghanistan. He was a radio technician, and he would fix the broken comms soldiers would bring back to the FOB, or the Forward Operating Base. While in the Middle East, he would work with the best Spec Ops teams in the military. From MARSOC, which is U.S. Marine Corps Special Forces, to the SEALs, the Rangers, and the British Marines. And about 7 months ago is when he got back from his last tour. It was around the time that Biden first took office, and the same time when something would take place that made U.S. forces decide it wasn't worth being there. And here is why. Viewer discretion advised. He was nearing the end of his tour when one of his SEAL buddies brought back a bunch of broken radios. After a mission where his team would take on 60% casualties, which was highly unusual in Afghanistan at this time. And they had been sent out on a patrol in the surrounding hills and mountains. They were in the Kandahar region of Afghanistan. Officially, his buddy would tell him they got attacked by a platoon-sized element of the Taliban. But for some reason, he could sense that he wasn't hearing the entirety of the story. Well, lucky for our technician, he had recently snuck booze into the wire. and he would end up getting drunk with the SEAL team member for 6 nights straight. When on the very last night of drinking together, the SEAL team member, out of the blue, would say you can't tell anybody about this. And the shit he's about to say should never be repeated. Our whistleblower would explain that the SEAL team member wouldn't go into gritty detail. He assumed it was either because he hadn't processed it yet, or someone forcibly told him not to tell a soul. During the mission, we would come up on a cave that was supposed to be a hostile outpost. But as they approached the outpost in the cave, they suddenly heard screaming inside. They then proceeded to a vantage point where they could get a better view out of sight of any enemy combatants. And when they finally got in position and glanced down into the cave, they couldn't believe their eyes. It was a giant standing anywhere from 16 to 20 feet tall, fighting the Taliban. He was crushing them limb from limb, tossing them around like rag dolls, killing one after another after another. The men were in shock. They couldn't believe what they were witnessing. They would watch for about 30 seconds and then decide it would be smart to take a tactical withdrawal. But as they were backing up, the giant would spot one of them, and with swift speed, he would pursue and be on top of them in seconds. He would engage and kill 3 of them immediately. So quickly, one of them called air support from an A-10. By the time the bombs buried the beast, he killed 8 SEALs and corpsmen, wounding 2, but they survived. They were told to keep quiet because of backlash. Shortly after this incident, we would decide to make a hasty withdrawal. This would be the second time U.S. soldiers would battle a giant from Kandahar. This is the legend of the Beast of Bray Road. It was almost December 1990 when Heather Bola was playing with some friends in a nearby cornfield. They were having so much fun, night began to fall before they knew it. And just as Heather said, "We should be going home, it's getting late," all 4 of her friends froze in their tracks. At that moment, an eerie feeling crept over them. Heather looks at her friend. "I feel like there's something watching us." Her friend goes, "I know, I think I see it." "What is that?" she proclaimed. And just as they all turned to look at it, the beast leapt at them with precision speed. As it was barreling towards them, her and her friends let out a loud shriek and ran for the edge of the cornfield. After they cleared the cornfield, they continued running, but then, realizing they heard no footsteps, they stopped. All 4 of them turned around to look, and that's when they saw it. The beast was 7 feet tall, stood on 2 feet, and had glowing red eyes. 2 right after. This is the Beast of Bray Road, Part 2. The beast stood at the edge of the corn, glaring at them as if intelligent. Heather and her friends just stood there, frozen with fear. The beast let out a discontented growl, and disappeared into the darkness. When asked what it was, she was reluctant to say, but she knew all along. Jump to 2014. It was early October when Sanjay Singhal was driving down the 4-mile stretch known as Bray Road. He was cruising along at 55 when all of a sudden he caught something in his peripheral. He glanced over, and in the field next to him, he couldn't believe what he saw. It was a beast-like cryptid running next to him, but it was on 2 feet. The beast was covering 20 yards astride and floated almost magnificently across the landscape. As the beast was running next to him, it suddenly looked right at him. Sanjay recalls the fear that shot through his heart. The beast was looking at him almost as if it wanted him to know it was real. Welcome to Bray Road. This is the Beast of Bray Road, Part 3. So sightings, yes, have recently been happening. Nobody's exactly sure what it is, but they do believe it to be a werewolf. And people may laugh, but these people truly believe in this. Their beliefs stem from the ancient Indian civilizations that used to live there. It isn't very well known, but Wisconsin actually has up to 25,000 burial mounds. Some of them even depicting things like this. They believe it's actually a skinwalker. Most skinwalkers are generally bad to people, but some actually believe that these beasts are protecting us from something we don't want to see. They may be protecting us from another entity or another realm. I truly believe if they do exist, these beasts are going back to Middle Earth. Kind of like Bigfoot, there's no way he's been this elusive. He can actually jump through the stargates.